Viewers, from domestic matters to global issues, US President Donald Trump has been facing heat on all fronts. His high-pitched, over-the-top second presidency tenure hasn't won him many friends. Instead, he's being panned left and right on his own turf and on the global stage. From tariff tantrums, which includes 50% tariffs on India, to facing questions over his refusal to release the Epstein files. It hasn't been a smooth ride for Trump. Today, we're being joined in by a special guest who has seen Trump from inside out and explains his erratic behavior. And joining us is renowned author Mr. Michael Wolff. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to Times Now. Let me begin by asking you, you have been covering Trump, you've been writing about him for some time now. Do you think that you really understand the man? How much of him do you think you really have been able to fathom over these years?
Well, I don't know. That's a difficult question. I think I try my best.
That's it? A one-line answer?
That's it. It's a one-line answer. I mean, to a one-line question.
What would be your description of him in one word?
Erratic.
Erratic, all right. That's the only consistent thing about him, is that he's erratic. That's perhaps a good way of putting it. But let me begin by asking you, when the White House, when the court came down on Donald Trump's recent tariff offensive, what have you been able to make out of what happened in the White House? What is the weather like inside when the court orders came out?
Well, actually, that's interesting that you use that word, because what they say in the White House when anyone says no to Donald Trump is bad weather. And it's a very characteristic response. You cannot say no to Donald Trump. I mean, and I think that characterizes almost everything about the man and his politics. He cannot adapt to no. He cannot adapt to someone else being able to check whatever power he has. He needs to be all powerful. He needs to be right in every circumstance. The word no sends him into a fury. And actually, he kind of goes to war against anyone who says no to him.
Right. And, because there are some gems in the Trump administration, for instance, the likes of Peter Navarro, who've called India a laundromat for Kremlin and have thrown around terms like Brahmin profiteering without contest, have even called the Russia-Ukraine war Modi's war. What do you make about such elements?
Well, I mean, Peter Navarro is an idiot. I mean, he's just out of his depth. He's just he has a job in the Trump administration that no other administration, no other person would have given him. Actually, I think maybe nobody else in the world would hire Peter Navarro for anything. And that is not just Peter Navarro. That sort of characterizes many, many, many people in the Trump administration, which also often explains their level of loyalty to him. They have only Donald Trump because no one else would take them seriously at any level.
Absolutely. And it's being seen as a huge inflection point in India-US relations. We know the kind of rhetoric that we've seen over the last few days. But a few hours earlier, on Truth Social, Donald Trump has posted that looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together, President Donald J. Trump. And he's also put out a photo of Putin, Xi Jinping with Prime Minister Modi. Do you see this as a massive inflection point? Is this just another bargaining tactic, or is this perhaps, closing of options as far as the U.S. administration is concerned, or just another erratic statement, as you've articulated earlier?
Everything is erratic because everything can be reversed in a second. But I'd say that certainly at this point and going forward, he's left 70 years of American foreign policy in shambles, yes.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Whether things change and how they change, of course, remains to be seen. But I also want to now shift focus and talk about Epstein. Let me start with a very basic question. Why do you think that there is suddenly so much interest, particularly in the relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein? Why now, in fact, after no conversation, for instance, after so many years?
Well, I think it's partly has to do with me, actually. I mean, I had begun a conversation with Jeffrey Epstein in 2014, just having discussions with him about writing a possible book about him. And we spent many hours together, well more than 100 hours, discussing his life and his background and his relationships with many people. And that included Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend for more than a decade. They were each other's best friend. I believe they were each other's closest relationship, possibly in life. So shortly before the 2024 election, I released some of these tapes of Donald Trump of Jeffrey Epstein talking about his relationship with Donald Trump. And actually at that point, I expected that to be somewhat an inflection in the election. It was not. It was largely, completely ignored by mainstream or established media. But then it began to take on legs in digital media, on the internet, and there's been this kind of strange dichotomy between established media and internet media. Established media not interested in the Epstein story, digital media, the internet, absolutely obsessed with it.
Right.
So I think it has finally caught up to the conversation that everybody recognizes, or many people recognize, that Jeffrey Epstein understood to be just about the representative of evil in our world, that his best friend, the person he spent the most time with, was Donald Trump. So you have this strange inflection of these two guys who lived very similar lives, and one ends up with a bed sheet around his neck in the worst prison in the United States, and the other, very similar, and absolutely similar, a guy ends up as in the White House.
Right. Take us through the specifics of these conversations that you had. How long did you work, for instance, with Jeffrey Epstein? How long did you speak to him? And also, of course, take us through the contents and details that he mentions, about the relationship that he had with President Trump.
Well, he mentioned, I mean, as I said, I spoke to him for a long time, from 2014 until shortly before his death. There's about 100 hours of conversation. And it ranges over all manner of things, and I've discussed this in lots of other venues of his relationship with Trump, about Trump and women, about Trump and money, about it's a vivid picture of two guys in the 1980s and 1990s who were preoccupied with their interest in women, pursuing women, particularly fashion models, and a wide variety of get-rich-quick schemes. They styled themselves as what then might have been called playboys, what would be called predators now. They were together all of the time. On each other's airplanes. Actually, Trump mostly on Epstein's airplane, because Trump actually didn't have much money during this period. A portrait of a very, very close relationship.
You've also mentioned in certain conversations about how Epstein showed you certain photographs from a safe. Can you describe those photographs and what really transpired?
Yeah, Epstein would take out a set of about a dozen snapshots, and he took them out to show people as an amusing thing. I mean, this is after Trump became the president of the United States. And as I say, there were about a dozen pictures of Trump around Epstein's pool with young women. I couldn't tell you how young these women were, but they were young women. And there are three pictures that I specifically remember. Two of these young women, topless young women, sitting on Trump's lap, and then a third picture, Trump standing up, and he has a stain on the front of his pants, and the girls, 4 or 5 of them, are pointing at this stain and laughing.
Right.
Now, where those pictures are, I have no idea. I know that they were kept in Jeffrey Epstein's safe. We do know that after his arrest, the FBI came to his house and opened the safe and took its contents. Were those pictures there at the time? I don't know. But those pictures have since disappeared.
Right. And did Epstein at any point of time tell you why there was a falling out? Or because there are all sorts of, theories as to why that happened. One of the theories is that Epstein acted inappropriately with a daughter of a man.
Yeah, no. Let me just stop you there. That's not a theory. That's a statement from Donald Trump. Donald Trump obviously has a vested interest. Donald Trump is obviously famous for not telling the truth, and in this instance has a vested interest in not telling the truth. And nothing makes sense in the timeline that he that he's talking about. That Trump says this happened in 2000, but they have a documented friendship through to 2004, and the real reason that they ended their friendship was over a real estate matter.
Oh, it's a real estate matter. Yeah, okay.
Yes, and the circumstances were that Jeffrey Epstein believed he was the top bidder on a particular house in Palm Beach. He had bid $36 million. He took his friend Trump with him to look at the house and advise him on how to move the swimming pool. His friend Trump thereupon went around his back and bid $40 million for the house and became the winning bidder. Epstein knew that Trump did not have $40 million. Therefore, he fairly assumed Trump was the front man for someone else, probably involved in a money laundering scheme. Epstein threatened Trump to reveal this information, at which point Epstein believed that Trump went to the police and informed the police that Epstein had all of these young women at his house, and thereupon began Epstein's long legal problems.
Right. Do you think that the unreleased Epstein documents are dangerous because of specific names? Do you expect Trump to show up, if not as a client, as some sort of an enabler or even an observer?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of information undoubtedly in the so-called Epstein files about Donald Trump. I think you will be able to track much of their relationship, much of their through much of the friends that they had in common. Yes.
Right. And there's this entire row now over an official entire controversy of an alleged official who has claimed, Joseph Schmidt, who's with the Department of Justice. He's seen speaking to an undercover journalist and saying that they'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those Epstein files and leave all the liberal Democrat people in those files. Subsequently, there's also been a clarification from the DOJ that he had no role in the internal review of the Epstein files, that his statements were made based on what he had learned in the media. How do you see this episode?
Yeah, well, I think the Justice Department has absolute control over this material, and I think that they will be. I think that they will frustrate any effort to release it, and if they are forced to release it, they will curate it in a way to their favor.
All right. And we have spoken here at times now to some of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. The survivors have told us that Donald Trump's name isn't in the Epstein files, but the government seems desperate to protect. Now, who is Trump trying to protect if he isn't the one who's implicated?
Well, I don't understand. I mean, the women who have made allegations against Jeffrey Epstein would not particularly know what's in these files, except for the depositions that they have given. But and the depositions undoubtedly are part of this file, but there are many other aspects of this. Epstein's emails, what was on Epstein's hard drive, the FBI's own investigation into Epstein, the conversations the FBI may have had with Epstein. So I don't know what the point of exactly what the point is here. They would not know what's in these files.
Okay, because there are also some survivors who have described Epstein's circle as an unbreakable one. From your point of view, how much overlap exists between that circle and the Trump political machine, whether it's donors, whether it's media moguls, lawyers, fixers, etc., who've made scandals disappear for instance?
Yeah, well, there is overlap. They knew many of the same people, absolutely.
So there is an overlap. So there could be vested interests in the administration who are trying to bury it all. That's not something that we can rule out.
Well, I think it would be the release of Jeffrey Epstein's, of the material about Jeffrey Epstein that the government holds would be extremely awkward for many people. And that would be, I mean, I think it would be more awkward than necessarily criminal, although there might be that too. But I think that the danger, the paramount danger for Donald Trump is that there are nearly 15 years of Trump's life spent in close contact, close association with Jeffrey Epstein. That would be revealing, certainly, and I think in a very profound way would shatter the image that Donald Trump has now tried to project about himself.
Right. And some of these survivors also divulged that Epstein possibly kept files and profiles on all of the girls. What would you know about this?
Can you ask that question again?
All of these girls, Jeffrey Epstein actually had kept files about all of them who were victims, who were survivors. Do you know anything about this?
I don't.
All right. And we've also seen that it was Epstein who personally introduced girls to powerful men. Was there any chatter in either Trump circles or otherwise about who these other men might be and whether they included names that the public would be unprepared to hear?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot that's you've just packed a lot in there. Jeffrey Epstein knew an enormous number of people. He knew people throughout the United States government, throughout the general the general world of influence and power, and not only in the U.S., around the world. I personally think that it is probably the money trail that is revealing about these people and that unites these people rather than the sexual trail. But that's just my point of view on this.
Yes, very interesting point of view. But one of the survivors has also told us that Epstein would never have killed himself. From your reporting and research, as well as your sources in the administration, do you believe that insiders privately believe that Epstein's death was a silencing? And if so, who had the most to lose? Because there is a missing minute in the CCTV footage that has also been pointed out.
I mean, I rather think it's hard to kill someone in a minute. And my view has always been that the way Epstein would have had to have killed himself, the way that has been described, breaking his neck in several places, is implausible. At the same time, I have also thought that the idea that he might have been murdered, that something would have happened in the jail, would have then required certainly more than a half a dozen assistant U.S. attorneys and equally as many FBI agents to agree to maintain their own silence, and that never happens.
Right.
So I see it on both sides. It's implausible that he could have killed himself. It's implausible that he could have been murdered.
Right.
So I am apparently not helpful on this question at all.
All right. And Mr. Wolff, there are survivors who also suggest that the American public is not ready for what's in those files. Do you think that it's true, or it's more accurate to say that the American elite isn't ready?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I don't know what that means, that the American public is not ready for what's in those files. I think that there are aspects of those files that would be revealing to the American public and possibly upsetting to the American public. But I think overall, clearly, the American public wants those files to be released.
Right, and this was a election promise. How we had seen how it was promised before the election that those files would be released, but at the end of the day, they've only been redacted files, and we've heard how the authorities have come out to say that this is all that's going to come out in the public domain at the end of the day. How do you see all of this playing out?
You know, I don't see the Trump administration coming clean and being transparent about this information. So I think that this could become a central issue in the upcoming election, the 2026 midterm elections, and I think that it's almost a straightforward message. If you want the Epstein files to be released, you need to elect a Democratic Congress.
Right. Michael Wolff, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.
Thank you.